The Draventh Empire made one mistake before firing on Aurelia. They checked its allies, but not its debts. That sounds like a small difference. It was not. Alliances are written in treaties, reviewed by committees, updated by nervous diplomats, and abandoned the moment survival becomes expensive. Debts are different. Debts live in places no enemy intelligence scan knows how to search. They live in old rescue logs, in names carved into memorial walls, in a child remembering who opened a door when everyone else kept theirs locked. Aurelia was burning blue under orbital fire when War Marshal Karan Vake decided the planet would make a perfect lesson. From space, it looked almost too beautiful to conquer. Floating cities hung above silver oceans, connected by bridges of light and gravity towers that glowed like frozen lightning. Gardens covered the upper platforms. Music towers broadcast calming tones across the capital. The Aurelians were not warriors by nature. They were builders, healers, diplomats, the kind of species that still believed mercy was practical policy instead of a weakness waiting to be punished. Karan hated that about them. His fleet arrived with 42 warships, black hulls, red engine trails, and the confidence of predators entering a room full of glass. He did not begin with negotiation. He began with a demonstration. Plasma rounds struck the outer defense shield above the capital, not enough to break it, just enough to make every tower tremble and every civilian look up. Ambassador Vaila Wren stood in the central command gallery while the floor shook beneath her silver boots. She was older than most of the officers around her, silver-skinned, calm-eyed, and much too tired to pretend fear was beneath her. A young defense aide asked whether they should call the neighboring systems. Vaila did not answer immediately. She watched another wave of light roll across the shield, turning the sky white for 3 seconds. Then she looked down at the small object in her hand. It was not Aurelian technology. It was ugly, rectangular, and heavy, made from dark Terran alloy with a manual activation switch that looked embarrassingly primitive beside the elegant consoles around it. The humans had given it to her 31 years earlier, after the refugee convoy incident near the Kestrel Rift. 12,000 human civilians had been drifting without enough oxygen, without enough power, and without a single recognized claim under galactic emergency law. Every major port had refused them. Too dangerous, too political, too costly. Vaila had opened Aurelia anyway. She had risked sanctions, trade penalties, and the fury of 3 border councils for people she did not know and a species most of the galaxy considered loud, fragile, and temporary. When the humans left, their captain had pressed the device into her hands and said, "If you ever need us, send this." Vaila had smiled then, kindly, almost sadly, because everyone knew humans were grateful in the emotional way young species were grateful. Warm words, tearful speeches, little ceremonies. Then history moved on. Humanity disappeared into rebuilding. Aurelia returned to diplomacy. The galaxy forgot. Now the capital shield dropped from 40% to 32%, and Karan's voice filled every channel. Aurelia will surrender within 1 hour, or the next lesson will be permanent. Around Vaila, officers went silent. Outside the glass, evacuation lights streamed across the city like falling stars. She turned the Terran device over once, thumb resting on the switch. Her aide whispered, "Ambassador, do you truly believe they will come?" Vaila looked at the burning sky and remembered 12,000 exhausted human faces stepping into her ports, alive because one door had opened. "No," she said softly. "I believe they will remember." Then she activated the signal. War Marshal Karan Vake received the Terran signal intercept 16 seconds after Vaila sent it, and he laughed so hard his bridge officers relaxed. That was how little they understood the mistake. To them, the signal was not a threat. It was a relic, a desperate emotional gesture from a cornered diplomat reaching for a species with more history than influence. Karan enlarged the transmission on the main display, studying the crude human encryption with visible disgust. "Look at this," he said, turning. So every officer could hear him. "Aurelia is calling its pets." The bridge answered with polite amusement. Not too much. Draventh officers laughed only as far as rank allowed. Karan enjoyed that. He believed fear was the cleanest form of discipline. He believed mercy was a decorative word used by civilizations too comfortable to survive pressure. And the Aurelians, in his opinion, had been comfortable for far too long. Below, The capital shield flickered again as his fleet tightened its firing pattern, pushing waves of controlled energy across the upper atmosphere. The goal was not destruction. Not yet. Karan wanted something more useful than ruins. He wanted surrender on camera. He wanted every neutral world watching Aurelia, the great diplomatic jewel, bow because kindness had no teeth. So he opened a planet-wide channel. His image appeared above every public square, every emergency shelter, every command hall, and every floating bridge where frightened civilians looked toward the sky. Vaila watched from the command gallery as his armored face filled the central screen. "People of Aurelia," Karan announced, voice smooth and heavy. "Your leaders taught you that compassion creates safety. They lied. Compassion creates debt, and debt creates weakness. 31 years ago, your ambassador risked your prosperity for human refugees. Today you will see the value of that investment." He paused, letting the insult settle. Nothing. No fleets. No treaties. No saviors. Only a fading signal crossing empty space toward a species too slow to matter. A defense officer beside Vaila clenched both hands, but said nothing. The shield dropped to 27%. Karan continued, clearly enjoying the theater. Humans remember songs. Humans remember speeches. Humans remember birthdays and little flags and the names of lost ships. But war is not won by memory. War is won by force. He lifted one gauntlet hand, and 3 Dravant cruisers shifted formation above the first floating district, their cannons glowing like red sunrise through the clouds. Vaila stood perfectly still. That made Karan smile wider. "Ambassador Wren, you may address your people. Tell them mercy was worth the cost." The room turned toward her. Every aide, every officer, every civilian coordinator waiting for evacuation orders. They expected a plea, maybe an apology, maybe a promise that diplomacy would still find a way. Vaila stepped to the console, touched the audio key, and looked directly into the broadcast. "War Marshal," she said, calm enough that even Karan blinked. "You misunderstand humans." A ripple passed through his bridge. Vaila continued. "They are not slow because they are weak. They are slow because when they move, they bring everything." Karan stared at her for one long second. Then his amusement vanished. "Break the first shield layer," he ordered. The cruisers fired in perfect sequence. The sky above the floating district flashed white, and the city trembled so sharply that several officers grabbed the railings. But the shield held. Barely. Alarms sang across the command gallery. The aide at Vaila's side whispered that the next strike would open the district to occupation forces. Vaila did not look away from the screen. She knew the signal had only just begun its journey. She knew Earth was far. She knew hope was not a defense plan. But she also knew the look she had seen in human eyes 31 years ago, when starving parents carried sleeping children through Aurelia's open gates and realized someone had chosen them over politics. Karan leaned closer to his camera. "Still waiting for gratitude to save you?" Vaila answered softly, "No. I am waiting for mankind to decide how much to repay." The signal did not travel like a plea. That was the first strange thing our intercept analysts noticed. Distress calls screamed. They repeated themselves, widened their channels, begged nearby receivers to notice them, and filled every frequency with panic. Vaila Wren's Terran device did none of that. It sent one narrow beam into deep space, packed inside an encryption shell older than most modern defense systems, and then it went quiet. No second call, no demand, no dramatic speech, just coordinates, identity confirmation, and one sentence. "I hope your people lived." Karan dismissed it as sentiment because tyrants always mistake quiet things for weak things. The transmission slipped past the Dravant jamming net by using civilian rescue bands nobody bothered to monitor anymore. It bounced off an abandoned navigation buoy near the Kestrel Rift, crossed 6 empty sectors, and woke a relay satellite drifting above a frozen moon where no ship had docked in 20 years. The satellite should have been dead. Its solar wings were cracked. Its outer shell had been scarred by dust and ice. But human machines are irritating that way. They keep working long after polite engineering says they should stop. The relay received the message, verified the old alloy signature, and turned toward Earth. Back on Aurelia, Vaila had no way to know any of that. She only knew the capital shield had dropped to 19%, and the first Dravant landing barges were descending through the upper clouds. Their hulls looked like black stones falling through blue light. Civilian shelters were full. Medical lifts were overloaded. The floating gardens had been evacuated except for maintenance crews trying to keep the gravity towers stable. Every few seconds, the city trembled, not from panic, but from controlled impacts against a defense system that had never been meant to hold against a full Imperial fleet. A young aide asked Vaila if they should prepare evacuation ships. She almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because evacuation required somewhere to go. Quran had already blocked the upper lanes. The lower sea platforms were under surveillance. Every official escape route was now a trap with paperwork attached. Keep families below the shield line, Vaila said. Move power from the embassy quarter to the hospitals. Ambassador, that will darken the council hall. Good, she replied. The council can be brave in the dark. It was a small line, but it steadied the room. That was Vaila's gift. She could make fear stand up straight. Outside the city, the first landing barge crossed the shield boundary through a forced opening and released armored troops onto an empty transit platform. They expected resistance. Instead, they found the lights off, the train lines disabled, and every direction sign changed to point them in. Circles. Aurelians were not warriors, but they had been diplomats for centuries, and diplomacy teaches a species how to delay unpleasant guests. The Dravant commander on the platform reported confusion. Quran called it cowardice. Vaila called it time. Meanwhile, far beyond Aurelia, the old signal reached the outer Terran listening web at the edge of the solar system. It touched a silent receiver hidden among ice rocks past Neptune, then another near Saturn, then a classified relay buried inside routine lunar traffic. Each station read the identity tag and passed it inward faster. No one asked permission. No committee reviewed it. The system had been waiting 31 years for this exact name. On Earth, night covered the eastern coast of the United States when a secure terminal beneath the Appalachian Defense Complex woke from standby. A single red file appeared on a black screen. A duty officer stared at it, confused at first, then suddenly very careful. The file carried no political label, no expiration date, and no option to dismiss. It contained Vaila Wren's name, the Kestrel Rift refugee record, and an instruction written in plain English, never forgotten. The officer swallowed, lifted a secure phone, and made one call. The secure phone rang once in a room that officially did not exist. General Marcus Hale was not sleeping, because people who had commanded Terran relief operations during the border collapse learned not to trust quiet nights. He stood in the Appalachian Defense Complex with a mug of cold coffee in one hand and a wall of star maps glowing in front of him, reviewing supply routes that most politicians found too boring to fund until disaster made them fashionable. The duty officer did not waste words. Sir, black file activation. Name match confirmed. Vaila Wren. Marcus stopped moving. Not dramatically. The coffee did not fall. His voice did not rise. He simply set the mug down, turned from the star map, and said, "Put it on the main wall." The room changed at once. Officers who had been half relaxed became perfectly still. A black file was not a request. It was not diplomacy. It was a promise humanity had made when it had almost been too weak to make promises. Vaila's image appeared on the screen beside the old refugee convoy record. 12,000 civilians. 6 failing ships. Oxygen at 4%. Power below survival minimum. Denied entry by 7 ports. Accepted by Aurelia under Ambassador Vaila Wren, against council restrictions. Marcus read every line, although he already knew the story. Every officer in that room knew the story. Some had parents who survived because of it. Some had grandparents. One communications specialist had been born in an Aurelian medical bay 3 hours after the gates opened. Quran Vake's fleet data appeared next, pulled from long-range intelligence feeds and fresh intercepts. 42 Dravant warships. Active siege formation. Civilian world under pressure. Shield degradation continuing. Estimated time to city breach, 22 minutes. A younger captain looked at Marcus and asked the question no one else wanted to ask. Sir, do we have authorization from the council? Marcus looked at him for half a second. Captain, 31 years ago, Aurelia did not wait for authorization to save our people. That ended the discussion. Not loudly, not angrily. It ended because everyone in the room understood that some debts are older than permission. Marcus stepped to the command rail and placed his palm on the activation plate. The system scanned him, confirmed his authority, and opened a second map beneath the first. Hidden routes appeared across deep space. Relief corridors, defense caches, medical carriers, shield tenders. 3 fast response ships were already within jump range, running quiet near the Kestrel lanes. Behind them, larger signatures waited in shadow, hundreds of them, scattered across friendly docks and dead zones, disguised as cargo convoys and humanitarian reserves. Humanity had not forgotten Vaila Ren. Humanity had built a response around the possibility that one day, gratitude might need engines. Marcus leaned toward the microphone. All Terran Relief Command assets, priority black. Debt confirmed. Across Earth, orbit, and stations nobody advertised, crews woke to alarms they had hoped they would never hear and trained their entire lives to. Answer. Dock clamps released. Hospital ships powered reactors. Defense cruisers loaded shield capacitors instead of invasion rounds. Engineers opened sealed crates marked humanitarian emergency equipment and smiled when they saw how heavily armored the word humanitarian had become. The young captain checked the projection again. First ships can arrive in 6 minutes, sir. Full fleet in 12. Marcus looked at Aurelia, glowing blue and fragile under Draventh fire. Send the first 3 now. Only 3. Marcus allowed himself one small smile. No, 3 is just how humans knock. Then he opened a direct channel to the fast response group and gave the order that turned an old favor into a military event. Stand between Aurelia and the guns. Do not fire unless fired upon. Make sure they see the flag. The first 3 Terran ships arrived over Aurelia like an apology delivered at light speed. No trumpet flare. No victory formation. No aggressive broadcast promising revenge. Just 3 white hulls sliding out of jump space between the Draventh siege line and the capital shield, close enough that every targeting officer in Coran Vake's fleet forgot how to breathe for one very embarrassing second. They were not the largest ships in the human registry. They were not even painted like warships. Their markings read Terran Relief Command in clean blue letters along the sides, the kind of labeling civilized species associated with blankets, medicine, and evacuation corridors. Coran saw them and smiled again. That smile spread across his bridge like permission to be stupid. 3 rescue craft, he said. Human gratitude has a disappointing sense of scale. His officers laughed because he laughed. Below, in the Aurelian command gallery, Vaila Ren did not laugh. She gripped the railing as the Terran vessels moved into position with impossible confidence. One above the failing shield, one near the eastern gravity tower, and one directly in the path of the Draventh cruisers preparing their next strike. The young aide beside her whispered, "They came." Vaila answered without looking away from the sky. "No, they arrived first." That difference mattered. The lead human ship opened a channel across every military frequency. Its captain was a woman with a flat Midwestern accent and the exhausted calm of someone who had handled too many emergencies to be impressed by another one. Draventh Fleet, this is the Terran Relief Vessel Mercy of Baltimore. You are firing on a protected civilian world under active Terran debt response. Cease offensive action and move to a safe distance. Coran stared at the display, then leaned toward his own channel. You brought hospital ships to a siege. The human captain did not blink. We brought witnesses. Coran's smile thinned. He ordered the forward cruisers to continue their strike, not at Aurelia this time, but at the 3 Terran ships blocking his perfect lesson. The Draventh cannons charged in sequence, red light growing under each black hull. Across Aurelia, civilians watched from shelters and transit tunnels as the sky turned harsh and bright. Vaila's officers begged the humans to move. The Mercy of Baltimore did not move. Neither did the other 2 ships. At the last second, all 3 Terran vessels unfolded shield wings from their hulls, wide arcs of blue-white force that locked together over the city like a hand closing around a fragile flame. The Draventh strike hit the shield wall and stopped there. Not vanished. Not ignored. Stopped. The impact rolled across the sky in silent waves, pushing clouds outward for miles, shaking windows, making the floating bridges hum. But the city beneath remained whole. On Coran's bridge, alarms complained that should not be possible. Relief ships were not supposed to carry military-grade gravitational shielding. The human captain came back on the channel, still calm. You have now fired upon Terran vessels engaged in civilian protection. Karan's jaw tightened. Then you have chosen war. A second screen opened beside the captain's face. General Marcus Hale appeared from Earth Command, gray-eyed, steady, and entirely unimpressed. No, War Marshal. You chose it when you threatened the woman who saved 12,000 of ours. Karan looked from Marcus to the three ships, then back to Marcus. This is your answer? Marcus gave the smallest smile. No, this is the receipt. Behind the nearest moon, space began to ripple. Karan Vake did what proud commanders do when reality insults them. He ordered more firepower. Not better strategy. Not careful analysis. Just more guns, more energy, more noise. As if the universe could be bullied back into making sense. Every Draventh cruiser in the forward line rotated toward the three Terran relief ships, and the space above Aurelia filled with red targeting beams. On paper, it was absurd. 42 warships against 3 vessels marked for rescue operations. The outcome should have been a mathematical formality. Karan even reopened the public broadcast so Aurelia could watch human gratitude become wreckage. That was his 6th mistake. Humans are at their most dangerous when someone gives them an audience. The Mercy of Baltimore and her 2 sister ships did not scatter. They did not return fire. They moved closer together, tightening their shield arcs until the 3 blue-white fields overlapped into one curved wall between Aurelia and the Draventh fleet. Inside the Aurelian command gallery, officers shouted warnings that the shield load was climbing past safe limits. Vaila Wren stood with both hands on the railing, watching the human ships hold position with the terrible patience of people who had already accepted the cost. General Marcus Hale appeared on the side channel, calm as winter. Captain, status. The human captain answered while alarms flashed behind her. Shields are hot. Capacitors stable. We can hold. Karan heard that and snapped an order across his bridge. Break them. The Draventh fleet fired as one. The sky above Aurelia turned white, blue, and red at the same time, a silent storm rolling across the upper atmosphere. The shockwave pushed clouds into rings that spread for miles. Floating towers rocked. Harbor lights flickered. Children in the shelters covered their ears, even though the sound arrived late and muffled. The Terran shield wall bent inward under the pressure, flexing like glass under a giant hand, but it did not fail. It widened. That was when our analysts noticed the impossible part. The Terran ships were not merely blocking the strike. They were catching it, shaping it, pulling the momentum through their shield lattice and feeding it into something below the visible spectrum. Karan's science officer went pale. War Marshal, their defensive field is anchoring to our drive signatures. Karan turned slowly. Explain. The officer swallowed. The harder we push, the more precisely they map us. Marcus Hale watched the same data from Earth and gave one quiet command. Lock the frame. The 3 Terran ships opened their lower arrays. Not weapons. Anchors. Invisible gravity lines snapped outward across the battle space and attached to every Draventh vessel that had fired. Engines stuttered. Formation drift stopped. Cruisers that had been gliding into attack posture suddenly hung in place like insects caught in clear amber. Karan ordered full reverse thrust. His flagship shuddered but did not move. He ordered lateral burn. Nothing. He ordered emergency separation from the formation. Still nothing. The fleet had not been destroyed. It had been held. That frightened the Draventh more than destruction would have, because destruction was simple. This was control. Vaila looked from the frozen enemy ships to the 3 human vessels glowing above her world. They are not attacking, her aide whispered. No, Vaila said, voice soft with recognition. They are making sure the enemy cannot leave before the bill arrives. On the main channel, Karan forced his voice steady. Hale, release my fleet. Marcus looked at him without anger, which somehow made it worse. You fired on civilians. You fired on relief ships. You mocked a debt you did not understand. Now you are going to stay right there and learn how humans repay one. Behind Aurelia's moon, the rippling space grew brighter. 1 signal became 10. 10 became 100. The Draventh sensors filled with incoming Terran signatures. And for the first time since the siege began, Karan Vake looked away from Aurelia and toward the dark. The first Terran ship to emerge from behind Aurelia's moon was not a battleship. That confused Karan more than anything that had happened so far. It was a hospital carrier, white and blue, long as a city block, with medical crosses glowing along its hull, and rescue bays already opening toward the planet. Then came another, then 6 more. Then the dark behind the moon filled with human engines, and the Draventh bridge fell into the kind of silence that only comes when arrogance runs out of math. Warships arrived, yes, but they did not come alone. Shield cruisers, evacuation barges, engineering rigs, fuel tankers, communications ships, mobile clinics, drone tenders, heavy defense platforms shaped like floating fortresses, cargo haulers with armor thicker than some destroyers. Every class of vessel carried the same Terran Relief Command mark, and every single one locked formation around Aurelia, like humanity had not come to conquer a battlefield, but to put a world back together while the enemy watched. Karan stared at the display as the numbers climbed past 100, then 200, then 300 active signatures. His tactical system tried to classify the incoming force and failed because no empire had a clean category for a fleet built equally from compassion and threat. One officer whispered, "Is this an invasion group?" Another answered, "No, it is a rescue group." That was worse. In the Aurelian command gallery, civilians began to cheer, but Vaila Wren did not. Not at first. She watched the sky with both hands over her mouth, eyes bright, expression breaking under the weight of 31 years. The humans had not sent a polite reply. They had not sent a symbolic escort. They had emptied docks, opened old corridors, and moved a civilization because one Aurelian woman had once refused to close a door. General Marcus Hale appeared again on the main channel, his image now mirrored across every Terran ship in orbit. Behind him, the Appalachian command room burned with quiet motion, officers routing aid, tracking enemy weapons, and assigning rescue lanes with terrifying calm. "Ambassador Wren," Marcus said, "Terran Relief Command is on station. Civilian evacuation support is inbound. Medical and shield assets are deploying. We are sorry for the delay." Vaila let out one breath that was almost a laugh and almost a sob, but her voice stayed steady. "General Hale, you came with an armada." Marcus looked briefly off-screen as another wave of ships completed formation. "No, Ambassador. We came with interest." Karan slammed one armored fist onto his command rail. "Enough of this theater. Target the new arrivals." His weapons officer did not move. Not from mercy. From data. Every Draventh firing line was now pinned by Terran gravity anchors. Every safe approach was blocked by shield ships. Every attempt to reposition showed 3 human solutions already waiting there. The Empire had prepared to break Aurelia. Humanity had prepared to protect it from every angle at once. Then the fleet changed shape. The hospital ships dropped toward the upper atmosphere, escorted by sleek defense cutters. Engineering rigs moved to stabilize damaged gravity towers. Shield cruisers spread above the capital, layering blue-white barriers over the exhausted Aurelian defenses. And the warships, the real warships, the dark gray human vessels that had said nothing since arriving, turned as one toward Karan's fleet. They did not fire. They did not need to. Their targeting lights appeared across every Draventh hull, precise, patient, and personal. Marcus Hale addressed Karan again, no anger in his voice, no triumph, just accounting. "War Marshal, you mistook kindness for weakness. That is common. You mistook gratitude for sentiment. That is expensive." Karan looked at the frozen icons of his own fleet, then at the expanding human formation, and finally understood the scale of the debt he had stepped into. Aurelia had done one favor for mankind. Mankind had returned with a world-sized receipt. Marcus Hale did not order the Terran warships to destroy the Draventh fleet. That disappointed Karan for half a second, because destruction was something he understood. Destruction gave a commander a clean story to tell himself. The enemy was savage. The enemy was reckless. The enemy won because they were willing to break everything. Marcus gave him no such comfort. He turned gratitude into mathematics. The first Terran move was silence. Not emotional silence. Operational silence. Every human ship in orbit shifted into a frequency pattern that swallowed Draventh command traffic and replaced it with clean white static. Karan shouted for fleet coordination and received nothing but his own voice bouncing back through dead channels. The second move was restraint. Terran cutters swept forward in pairs, not aiming at crews, not aiming at life support, but at the external weapon housings along the Draventh hulls. Blue-white pulses flashed in neat lines across the siege formation, and one by one, cannon ports went dark. Not blown apart, not torn open, simply made useless, like locks with the keys removed. The third move was humiliation. Human engineering rigs, the same blocky vessels Quran had dismissed as repair craft, latched gravity fields onto Draventh engines and rotated entire cruisers away from Aurelia with the calm efficiency of tow trucks moving badly parked cars. On the Aurelian surface, the Capital Command Gallery watched the impossible unfold. Vaila Ren stood beside the shield console as hospital carriers descended through safe corridors, their bays opening to receive civilians, their escorts forming graceful arcs above the floating districts. Relief teams reached damaged gravity towers before the smoke had fully cleared. Medical drones mapped shelter routes. Human voices filled the emergency channels, practical and steady, asking for landing clearance, patient counts, power grid status, water access, and whether anyone had allergies to Terran field rations. One Aurelian officer stared at the feed and whispered, "They are fighting a war and managing disaster relief at the same time." Vaila nodded slowly. "That is how they say thank you." Quran tried one last strategy. He ordered his flagship to break formation and drive directly toward the weakest layer of the Terran shield grid. It was the kind of desperate move that looked bold on a tactical display and foolish everywhere else. Marcus saw it coming before the flagship finished turning. Left anchor, close the pocket. Mercy group, reinforce Aurelia. Gray line, show him the wall. The human formation answered instantly. 3 defense cruisers slid into Quran's path and unfolded their shield plates. Behind them, 8 warships lit their targeting. Arrays, each one locking onto a separate system on the flagship. Engines, weapons, communications, navigation, hangar doors, and command uplink. Quran froze because he finally understood. Marcus could end the flagship at any moment, but he was choosing not to. That choice was not weakness. It was control. Marcus opened a private channel to the Draventh bridge. His face appeared on Quran's main screen, tired, calm, American, and very difficult to impress. "War Marshal, I am going to offer you the same mercy Ambassador Ren once offered us. Take your people home alive." Quran's jaw tightened. "You think mercy makes you superior?" Marcus leaned closer. "No. I think remembering who gave it to us makes us dangerous." Then he gave the final order. Every Draventh ship lost propulsion in the same second. The siege line went dark from front to rear, 42 warships hanging powerless above the world they had come to frighten. Aurelia's shield stabilized. Terran rescue lights filled the sky. Quran looked at the fleet map and saw no battle left to command, only consequences waiting patiently for his signature. Quran Vake signed the withdrawal order with a hand that had commanded worlds to kneel and now could barely hold steady. That was the part the galaxy replayed for years. Not the frozen Draventh fleet. Not the Terran shield lines glowing above Aurelia. Not the rescue carriers descending through blue clouds while civilians waved from shelter balconies. It was the signature. One proud war marshal, seated on his powerless flagship, authorizing a full retreat under the supervision of the species he had mocked as sentimental. Marcus Hale did not smile when the order came through. He reviewed the transmission, confirmed the fleet's surrender protocols, and passed control to the neutral monitors who had arrived far too late to be useful, but exactly on time to look official. "Allow them life support, navigation, and medical passage," Marcus said. "Weapons remain offline until they are outside Aurelian space." A captain beside him asked whether Draventh Command would honor the terms. Marcus looked at the silent warships hanging above the planet. "They will if they enjoy having engines." On Aurelia, the capital shield finally cooled from emergency white to soft blue. The floating districts settled back into stable altitude. Families emerged from shelters blinking at a sky filled with human ships, not as conquerors, not as occupiers, but as workers. Repair crews crossed light bridges with tool packs. Medical teams guided children and elders toward relief stations. Engineers argued politely with Aurelian technicians about power transfer standards. Someone from a Terran hospital carrier had brought coffee, which caused immediate diplomatic confusion and then cautious approval. Vaila Ren stood in the command gallery watching it all, her silver hands folded tightly before her. She had expected help, perhaps, in the secret part of her heart she never admitted to the council. She had not expected a civilization to arrive carrying shields, doctors, mechanics, negotiators, and enough warships to make an empire reconsider its personality. When Marcus finally came down to the surface, he did not arrive in ceremonial armor. He wore a dark service jacket, plain boots, and the tired expression of a man who had been awake too long but had no intention of mentioning it. Vaila met him on the same landing platform where, 31 years earlier, human refugees had stepped into Aurelian air for the first time. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Around them, Terran and Aurelian crews moved past each other with quiet purpose, already rebuilding what fear had shaken. Vaila broke the silence first. "General Hale, what you brought here was far beyond repayment." Marcus looked toward the city, where shield towers were lighting one by one. "No, Ambassador. It was almost enough." She studied him carefully. "I opened a port. That was all." Marcus shook his head. "You opened a future. 12,000 people walked through your gates. Their children serve in our fleets, our hospitals, our schools, our farms, our councils. Half the officers who answered your signal grew up hearing your name before they knew what a star map was." Vaila looked away then, because dignity is difficult when history stands in front of you wearing a human uniform. Above them, the last Dravant ships turned toward the outer lanes, escorted by Terran cutters until their drives cleared the gravity boundary. Karan sent no final threat, no promise of return. His official report to the Dravant High Court was short, blunt, and later leaked across half the known sectors. It said Aurelia was protected by a human debt claim of unknown scale, and further aggression was strategically irrational. That phrase became famous because it was the most frightened way any empire had ever said, "Do not touch them." Within a year, galactic academies rewrote their diplomacy manuals. Human gratitude received its own classification. Not emotional weakness, not symbolic loyalty. A strategic force multiplier with delayed activation and unpredictable escalation. Vaila hated that definition. Marcus found it accurate enough. When the memorial was repaired, the Aurelians added no statue of Marcus because he refused 3 times and then quietly escaped the ceremony. Instead, they placed the old Terran signal device inside a glass case beside the refugee names from the Kestrel Rift. Beneath it, in both Aurelian script and plain English, they carved the lesson the galaxy had learned too late. Mercy given to mankind does not disappear. It waits, gathers interest, and returns with vengeance.